right, folks, we're going to get started. Happy Friday. Good morning. I'm Laura Rudberg. I'm MassBio's Director of Events. Thank you for joining us for MassBio's virtual Possible Talks. These are 15 minutes of inspiring and engaging content in the style of a TED Talk. So today we have Tracy Antonelli. Tracy's a thalassemia patient and patient advocate for herself and her 3 gorgeous girls who also have thalassemia, a rare and inherited blood disorder. In order to survive with their disease, they require blood transfusions every 3 weeks, as well as daily chelation therapy, which all necessitate frequent visits to doctors. Tracy will shed light on what it's like for her and her children to live with a rare disease during COVID-19 and how they are continuing their treatment and what concerns they risk daily, concerns and risks they face daily. We've reserved a few minutes at the end for questions. So you'll see a Q&A button at the bottom there. You can add questions as you think of them. And if you see a question that you would have asked, go ahead and upvote that, and that will bring it up to the top and we'll answer it first. So Tracy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So at first, I just wanted to say thank you so much for discussing this important topic. It's definitely something for us that's on the forefront of our minds all the time, living with a chronic disorder during a pandemic. So I just want to thank you for sort of talking about this. And I also want to say a huge thank you to MassBio just for everything in general. As a family with 4 people with a rare disorder, we're incredibly thankful for all of the work that you guys do on behalf of patients. So as Laura said, we have beta thalassemia, which is basically a genetic blood disorder. I inherited it from my parents, who did not know that they had thalassemia trait until they had me. So that was a little bit of a surprise for them. And it's sort of interesting to talk to them about what that's like, to find out, you know, that you have a genetic disorder and that you've passed it on to your children. I have 1 younger sister, so I inherited 2 defective thalassemia genes, and my sister inherited none. So my parents had the 2 least likely combinations. I also have 3 daughters who have beta thalassemia major, which sounds like some really wild genetics, but actually they are adopted from China. We adopted them because they have beta thalassemia, and we just thought it would be just a wonderful way to have a family, to have children who have beta thalassemia like I do. So there's sort of different flavors of beta thalassemia. My daughters have beta thalassemia major, which means they make very little to no functioning hemoglobin, which is a component in your red blood cells that helps you, simply put, carry the oxygen around your body. I have something that used to be called thalassemia intermedia, which is sort of in a middle ground. And it means that I make some functioning hemoglobin, sort of ill-functioning hemoglobin. And so patients with thalassemia intermedia, some of them may not need transfusions, and some may need transfusions from the time they're very young. So there's sort of a whole spectrum of patients with thal intermedia. But either way, for all of us, we all actually require blood transfusions every 3 weeks, and daily chelation therapy, which is in the form of a pill for some people. So there are oral chelators now, which has been an incredible advancement for patients with thalassemia. So 2 of my daughters take pills daily, and they've been swallowing pills since they were 3 years old. And my daughter and I use a subcutaneous chelator, which means we have to wear a pump that delivers the medication for 12 hours a day. So that's another big piece of treatment with thalassemia. And but with the advent of these chelators, patients with thalassemia are living much longer lives than we used to, because before the chelation medicine was available, patients would get transfusions, which was saving them from this profound anemia. But at the same time, the iron buildup from the transfusions was killing patients. And so it was sort of like, what is making you better is also killing you. So now we have chelators, and patients are living much longer, fuller, healthier lives. So there's the transfusions, there's chelation every day, and then there's lots of other comprehensive care that's a part of really any one of these complicated medical disorders. But with thalassemia, there's, you need endocrine monitoring, you need monitoring for the drugs that you're taking. So, your eyes and your ears, you need cardiology appointments. We have MRIs that measure the iron in our bodies to make sure the chelators are working well. So there's sort of a lot of medical management with thalassemia. So a normal sort of day for us going for a transfusion is you go the day before, you have your type and screen done, and people don't always realize that. They think, well, my blood type is my blood type, but they look for antibodies that might build up in your body in between transfusions. So every time you go to the lab a day or two before, you have your labs done, and then you go for your transfusion day. And transfusion day is really, it's pretty much a full day thing by the time we get to the hospital and everything, but it, can take 5 hours or so to get a transfusion. Again, not something, I guess if you don't get transfusions, you don't realize how long it takes to get a unit of blood. So that's sort of a normal day for us. Since the COVID pandemic, things have absolutely changed. Going to the lab used to be sort of an outpatient experience, just like it is for everybody else. Like, you walk into the lab. Now it's, you need to make an appointment. So it's another piece that we're like scheduling around. We're used to scheduling everything around transfusions. Now we're also scheduling it around the lab. The lab used to be a real quick thing, and now the lab is sort of a long thing. So you're still going through the screening on the phone, the screening when you get there, having to wear the mask, not being able to sit down in the waiting room. So little changes like that. Transfusion day has also changed. It's changed for me, but I feel like as an adult, I can handle it pretty well. With the girls, it's a little bit more difficult because it's asking, little kids, so that the girls are 6, 9, and 10, to wear a mask for the entire day at the hospital. Don't touch anything. We're not going to ride in the elevator. We're going to use the stairs. Please don't touch the railing. So all of that has sort of added a whole other layer of stuff to manage with the girls. In addition, they used to be able to sit together for their transfusions. That's all they've ever known, is sitting with their sisters, we call it New Blood Day, getting their new blood together. And because of COVID and wanting to keep the number of people down, so that means, the nurse, the clinic assistant, the patients, me, instead of having all of us in one room, they're separating them. So the girls need to sit separate. And that means for me, I'm running in between their rooms all day. If I'm with my 6-year-old who really doesn't want to sit by herself during a transfusion, and I don't blame her. If I hear my 9-year-old down the hall yelling for me, I don't know if she needs me because she feels like she's getting a high from her transfusion or because she wants me to change the channel. So it's a whole stressful thing. They've decreased the numbers of volunteers in child life. Again, so there's not so many people in the infusion unit. So that means there's less support for parents. And while I absolutely understand why they've done this, it's still absolutely, another level of stress for parents who are taking kids in for infusions. So I think one thing that this has brought out for both patients with thalassemia and parents of patients is a whole new level of anxiety. Because going for a blood transfusion is just part of my life and it's part of my kids' life. Normally, if you tell somebody else you're going for a blood transfusion, it sounds sort of like a big deal, but to us, it's just what we do. But now it's sort of turned into this anxiety-provoking thing where the night before I'm thinking about, well, who is in that chair before I'm going to sit in that chair, and am I going to be using a shared bathroom with somebody who may be asymptomatic and doesn't know they have COVID, and I might get exposed to that. So it's sort of it's brought everything sort of to the forefront. It's also made me think a lot about how serious having beta thalassemia is, because when you listen to everybody saying, we're not doing things that are elective. This is only non-elective stuff that's happening. It makes you realize that this isn't elective. This is something that we need to live. And so while other people are able to stay home, we need to keep putting ourselves, out there in medical facilities. I had to have an MRI this week that wasn't elective, and that was scary. So thinking, who was in this MRI tube before me, and was it cleaned properly? And even though I definitely believe that everyone from the facilities workers to the nurses, everyone at the hospitals are doing their absolute best to keep us safe, you can't help but as a patient wonder, well, what if something gets missed? What if something wasn't cleaned properly? So it's sort of that new level of anxiety. And I think, the other thing is when you look at that list that the CDC put out of what are some, disorders that put you at increased risk for serious illness with COVID, the list isn't really all that long, but thalassemia is on the list. So it's sort of, it is, yeah, thalassemia and sickle cell are. And so that makes me wonder, as things open up and other children are able to maybe start, you know, playing with other kids and stuff, what does that mean for my kids? What does that mean for me? You know, and so the last thing I want to mention is obviously the concerns about the blood supply. So, you know, when this all started and businesses were closing, and so all the blood drives that happen at companies and blood drives that happen locally in your town, those were all canceled. So it was an unbelievable amount of blood that has gone uncollected. So, and you know, the Red Cross and the local blood donor centers, you know, like Children's has one, MGH has one, Kraft Center has one. They're doing an incredible job at, you know, ramping up their advertising and getting people to come in, but still it's a lot to make up for. And so thinking about, what if there is a blood shortage? What would that mean for my kids? You know, if they needed, say, 1.5 units of blood, they might say, we're not going to open that second unit because we don't want to open it just for half. And so the way I sort of explain that to people is, if you thought about, if there was a pill that you took that kept you healthy and alive, and your doctor said to you, well, there's a shortage, so we're going to try giving you just 3/4 of your dose, that would cause anxiety. So it's sort of thinking about that. And what the people have told us at the blood donor centers is that, you know, right now, while everything's out there, like on Instagram and on the news, and we've been participating in a lot of publicity about donating blood, it's on everybody's mind. It's hard to get an appointment, but we need to think 4 weeks out, because the need for blood is constant. And sometimes it falls to the back of your mind. You forget, you know, it's on the forefront of my life every day. But for other people, how do you encourage people when you're saying, stay in and only go out and do things that are necessary? How do you make people feel like donating blood is really necessary? And the flip side of it is that I can completely understand why somebody would say, I don't want to go into a blood donor center. You know, I'm keeping myself at home. I'm not even going to the supermarket. Why do I want to go to a medical facility? So sort of balancing those two things. And I'm completely sympathetic to people who are struggling with decisions like that. So, you know, so all that to say, that's sort of what we're dealing with. And I know that everybody is doing the absolute best they can on behalf of patients like myself and my children. And I can't be more appreciative of everyone who's donating blood and out there on the front lines. But it's definitely a hard time to be living with a chronic disorder.
So the reason we're here today, you and I, is because I donate blood all the time. And I got an email from the Red Cross asking when I'm going to come in again. And you and your girls were in the picture. And I immediately shot off an email. And I was like, Tracy, you're in my email. Look at this. So if anybody needs a really good reason to donate blood, just take a look at these sweet faces and this great advertisement they put on their house to remind everybody how important it is. So I hope you all can see that. That's Tracy's girls. So in case anybody's looking for a way to give blood, there is a drive coming up at Technology Square on June 5th. I'm going to be giving blood that day. I'm going to go back into Cambridge on June 5th and give blood. I have a more rare blood type. I'm A negative. I give a lot. I'm not afraid of needles. It doesn't bother me. I happen to bleed really fast, which is weird. So it takes an hour of my life. So if you're looking for a resource or a place to go, that's where I'm going to donate. And that's about a 1.5 weeks away. So you have time to schedule it, time to think about it. So that's our little pitch, donate blood. Tracy, I happen to know, because we've worked together a few times, that your background is in clinical trials. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how beta thalassemia led you to your career in trials. And I know now you're home with the girls, but you spent a lot of time and have a pretty distinguished background in clinical trial management. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And guys, it's time to ask questions. So if you have questions for Tracy, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, but I want to hear about your clinical trial experience.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of, you know, absolutely having thalassemia is what led me to, so I studied epidemiology and biostatistics. And I think the reason why I went into that is I grew up around hospitals and doctors and nurses a lot. And when I was little, I used to say I wanted to either be a hematologist or a ballerina. Definitely not ballerina quality. And the hematologist thing, I think I was so exposed to hospitals as a kid, and I think people go either way. And for me, it was like I kind of had enough. You know, I was like, I don't know if I want to be, you know, living thalassemia and then treating thalassemia or some other disorder. So I excelled at math, and I just sort of thought about a way that I could marry the two. So a love of medicine and a love of, you know, using my quantitative skills and put them together. And I came up with epidemiology and biostatistics, and then just sort of started a very long career in, you know, managing clinical trials. I worked as a clinical research coordinator. So I did everything. Worked at Children's Hospital Boston. I did get to work on something called the Thalassemia Clinical Research Network, which is super exciting. But thalassemia is kind of a small world. It's a really rare disorder. So it was sort of interesting because the people I was working with were also the people who were doing my MRIs and the people who were, you know, my hematologist was one of the investigators. So it was sort of, it was a neat experience. But I did that. I worked at Children's. I managed some trials on obesity in adolescents, drinking sugary beverages. That was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is very exciting. So it was all, you know, a lot of fun, and it definitely led me to that. And now I'm retired, raising the girls, which is absolutely harder than running clinical trials, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I think there's probably a few other people on right now who have become stay-at-home parents, whether they plan to or not. And I mean, my new artwork that now lives in my office because my children are home all the time. So we do have one question who came in. Do you have advice? And I know that you're in some networks with other thalassemia patients. Do you have advice for other thalassemia patients who might be struggling during this time? Do you have, or any rare disease patient who has to deal with the same challenges that you do, since your disease is so rare?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, for us, we have the Thalassemia Foundation, and many rare disorders have their own, you know, organization that's sort of the patient advocacy group. So I always say to get involved with the patient advocacy group, whatever it is, whatever rare disorder that you have. So we have the Thalassemia Foundation. And in fact, yesterday, when you and I were on our practice call, my girls were out doing a Zoom call that was sponsored by the Thalassemia Foundation, and it was all kids with thalassemia on the screen together, having a costume party and reading a story. And it sort of normalizes things, right? Everybody else on the screen is just like you. And for me, I've been participating in some Zoom calls that are with other adult thalassemia patients, and we talk together about like this anxiety piece, saying like, I don't lose sleep over getting a transfusion usually. That's just, you know, that's my life. But now I find myself dealing with this new anxiety, like, why, you know, I don't want to go into a medical facility, and it feels germy to me. So we have this sort of support network, and hopefully everybody out there who's got a rare disorder has a support network like that, because I think it's incredibly invaluable. That, and even the online Facebook groups. I mean, I have parent groups that I'm a part of, and you know, we share stuff together and experiences, and we've, you know, usually we're talking about what's the volume of blood you're getting, and now we're talking a lot about, you know, what's your center like during COVID. So I think it's an invaluable resource.
Yeah. I think we all need extra support these days, right? You need people who are going through the same challenges you are more than ever. Someone has asked, has the availability of your treatment become uncertain at any point during the pandemic? So we talked a little bit about how at some point, if there's not enough blood, you might have to get smaller transfusions than you should. But I'm wondering, chelation therapy, are your chelation drugs having problems with the pipeline, or is there any supply chain issues for your particular treatments?
There has not been. And like I said, we're on the most popular oral chelator and the most popular subcutaneous chelator. There hasn't been any problem with that. You see little things like, you know, normally they send us alcohol wipes out because the Desperol subcutaneous, you stick yourself with a needle. So there's been a little bit of rationing of, you know, supplies and stuff like that. When this all very, very first started, and I think it was right before there was a lot of publicity about, you know, even when the Surgeon General came out and said, like, donate blood. It was like before that, the girls had a transfusion and they got their full amount, but I have a friend whose son went like the next day and he didn't. So it was that situation where it was like he needed a unit and some of the next unit, and they said, we're not going to open that next unit because we don't want to waste, you know, we don't want to waste any blood. So at the very beginning, there was a little bit of rationing going on. And like I said, it's scary. And it's not to say, I mean, can you get by with a little bit less blood? Sure, but do you want to think of your kid having to feel anemic and get by with less blood? Not really. So, but thankfully now, I mean, and from what I've heard at Children's and stuff, they've done such a great job with using social media and using us. If you go to Children's and you go in the elevators, is that picture you showed of the girls saying, you know, thank you, you're doing a good job. So we've really tried to get people excited about donating blood, and I think so far it's working, but just everyone's going to keep thinking about it, like you.
Yeah, well, I don't know why. It's like one of those things, it's not that hard for me to do. I know some people are, I don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable because I know some people are very queasy or upset about the thought of a needle, but it's easy for me. So it's like, why not do it? Plus they give me Oreos at the end. I mean, come on, an excuse to have an Oreo, I'll take it. I do have one more question that is on my mind. So you worked in clinical trials. I'm curious about what pipelines are coming, what treatments are in the pipeline. Are some of them clinical trials? Is it anything that would work for you and the girls? Is it far? I know there's immunotherapy that's coming down the road. So what's in the future for beta thalassemia right now? What's close to coming to market?
Yeah, so there's so much going on. I mean, I keep saying to everybody, this is actually an awesome time to have beta thalassemia because there's so much hope on the horizon, you know, and so much of it is happening right here in Boston, which is incredibly exciting, you know. So there's obviously the Bluebird gene therapy, which is in trials and is approved in the UK and is coming. And I say that there's going to be a cure during my kid's lifetime. Absolutely, I believe that. And that might be it. Obviously, Acceleron had luspatercept that was approved, and I know some patients. It's exciting. You know, you hear about these things happening, and it's approved, and then within like a week, I'm on these, like I was talking about, these groups, these social media groups. We have some like private closed groups that are patients with thalassemia, and they're talking about being on luspatercept and what that's like and what that's done to their interval. So there are patients who are getting transfusions less frequently because of that drug. So that's happening. I know that Agios is working on something, Syros is working on something. So there's a lot of, I feel like around here, there's a lot of interest in thalassemia and a lot of stuff going on. So I feel like it's a real promising time right now. And so I have a lot of good stuff to look forward to. And I'm also blessed that for the four of us, our current regimen is working so well. So it's a happy time, I think.
That's amazing. It feels good to work in an industry that is always trying to find new solutions for patients. I mean, I know there's the financial aspect of it, right? I mean, there's benefits, but it's just nice. It's a good feeling to work in this industry and see people finding treatments. We're almost through our time. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A box. But do you want to bring the girls in? Let us see your daughters real quick before we.
Sure, let me yell for them. I think what you said, my husband locked them out. Let me get them.
Yeah, we were getting ready for this call and I saw her husband's hand reach in and lock the door. I was like, that's a good partner. It's a good partner that locks out your kids when you're on a call.
Yeah. So this is Franny. This is Franny, my 6-year-old.
Hello.
And where's
Oh, hi.
This is Emmy, and there's someone missing.
Oh, Tom Brady came to the show.
Right? Huh?
Wow, you shrank a little bit. You're a little shorter than you used to be, Tom. No, you're not wearing a Brady jersey?
Yes, she is.
Jersey. I know. He's in Tampa Bay now. We're going to have to all become Tampa Bay fans. It's okay. We can do it. Guys, you are amazing. I'm so proud of you for supporting your mom and for doing all the work you do to get people to donate blood and for being so brave when you go for your treatments. You're amazing. Well, you guys have a great weekend. Be good to mom. Give her a break. Do your homework. Do all your homeschooling. And wave goodbye to everybody. Everyone, we'll see you next week. Zach from Emerald Innovation is going to be on. Come join us next Friday and have a great Memorial Day weekend. And last but not least, donate blood. You got to donate blood. Bye, everyone. Have a super day. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, girls. Bye, guys.